I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today's webinar is the last webinar in our three-part series on how to start, grow, and ultimately maintain a dominating law firm website. And today we're going to talk about the domination phase for business attorneys. Just a few quick housekeeping matters before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded and it'll be available to replay online next week. And we'll also make those slides available so there's no need to take notes. We have a lot of ground to cover today. This webinar is scheduled to run for 2 hours. It may run a bit under or over, just depending upon how quickly we get through today's material. We won't be able to stop to answer questions during the presentation, but if you do have questions, we are going to have a questions and answers session at the end of this presentation. So if you do have questions along the way, please add them to the questions area or send us a public or private chat message and we'll address it at the end of the webinar. We may be having some technical difficulties with the sound this morning, so if anyone's having trouble hearing us, let us know in the chat area of the GoToWebinar control panel and we'll try to address that as soon as we can. For those of you who aren't familiar with me, my name is Victoria Blute and I'm the community manager here at LawLytics. My job is to keep attorneys on the cutting edge of web technologies and online legal marketing and to help you learn what works on the web. I come from a journalism background, and if you happen to be a frequent reader of our blog or if you've attended some of our webinars, you may recognize me. If you joined us for the first 2 webinars in this series, you'll recall that I went into great detail about how the search engines work, about various types of content that lawyers should include when starting their websites. And we also looked at some other ideas too, including how social media can work with your law firm's website to amplify your firm's signal, extend your reach, and reinforce your reputation. If you attended the first webinar in this series, you are likely already familiar with our other presenter as well. But if you're not, I just want to give you a quick introduction to her before we get started. Rachel Shalott holds a JD and a master's and practiced law before joining LawLytics. And she's the vice president of content operations here. She's in charge of all of our content operations, which produces millions of written words for our members' websites and blogs each year. And in the first 2 webinars in this series, Rachel demonstrated the basic building blocks of content to get law firms started in the right direction. And then she built on that information in the Grow series to take you deeper into the strategy and the execution of growing a business law web presence. Before Rachel and I present, I want to also briefly introduce you to our CEO, Attorney Dan JAFFE, and I want to spend a little bit of time on some foundational items as well. Before Dan became the full-time CEO of LawLytics, he built 2 successful law firms in both Washington State and Arizona. And he started a highly successful online legal directory that was later acquired by a large internet company. And during Dan's years of practice, he himself will tell you that he made a lot of marketing investments and he also got badly burned several times. And what this led him to realize was that nobody cared about his practice like he did, and that in order for him to succeed, he needed to understand how the internet functions. He needed to know how potential clients were using the internet, and he needed to be in control of his marketing as well. So he did the heavy lifting to figure this out early on, and that's why he co-founded LawLytics, to make it easy for attorneys to be in control of their marketing without wasting their time or money. And today he loves showing fellow attorneys how this stuff really works. So what is LawLytics? I want to briefly review who we are, what we do, and why it matters. So you have many choices of companies and technologies to design, build, host, and help you market your law firm's website. And at LawLytics, we do all of that. And we also have a lot of competition. So what is LawLytics? How are we different? Our company is obsessed with the pursuit of the most efficient method of marketing for each law firm. And as we see it, there are 2 major variables of efficiency. There's time and there's money. And LawLytics was created to empower law firms to have unlimited marketing success without wasting time or money. And we really have 2 different types of competitors. On the one side, we have full-service marketing companies like Fine Law, and Martindale Nolo. And LawLytics is built to give attorneys all of the upsides of using a full-service company without exposing you to the potential risks and downsides. On the other side are do-it-yourself website software programs, ones like WordPress and Wix, and these are usually cheap or free to use. But the problem is that these programs tend to come with steep opportunity costs. Attorneys will often struggle to make them work, and that has them wasting their time and missing opportunities along the way. So while both full-service companies and do-it-yourself platforms are viable options, LawLytics offers a more practical solution for lawyers. Our company works exclusively with attorneys, and our services are adaptable to every stage of a law firm's growth. So our members can start as small as they choose and grow as big as they decide. And that's without taking dangerous risks or committing to things that might not work. And because our software is built exclusively for lawyers, the learning curve is really easy, and that enables our members to add to and edit their websites and turn their efforts into new business without struggling. So, if you're joining us in this webinar after having seen the Start and the Grow series for business attorneys, then you probably have a good sense of where we might be headed. But for those of you who are joining us for the very first time, I want to give you the framework for where you are in this webinar to make sure that you're in the right place. So this three-part series for business attorneys lays out a clear roadmap for successful legal marketing, because we recognize that the path to cost-effective and efficient law firm marketing online is often quite unclear for attorneys. And sometimes that's a problem of not knowing what to do or what works. Other times attorneys may understand what they need to do, but they're not sure how to do it. And other times it can be a matter of getting distracted by the latest trend or getting tripped up by SEO sales talk, or other things that can keep you from your goals. But to do this right, we recommend implementing the information that's in this series in chronological order. So here is a quick review of what was discussed in the first two parts of this series. In the Start series, we explained how to get started with a law firm web presence. And that's whether you are brand new to online legal marketing, or if you have a website, but it's just not working for your firm. We laid the groundwork for marketing your business law firm with sound and sustainable strategies, and how to use that foundation to take your marketing where you want it to go. So we explained the basics, and we showed you that to start smart, you really need to be able to do just a couple things well. And so long as you avoid the traps and the tricks, that foundation will really take you as far as you want to go. And then in the Grow series, we went over a variety of tools and tips that can assist you in your long-term content strategy, as well as how to understand the key performance indicators that help you market your firm effectively and without wasting time or money. We also discussed a lot of the vanity metrics that SEO salespeople and legal marketers will sometimes use. And these are ones that can really confuse attorneys and send them down the wrong path, or keep them on the hook without having anything real to show for it. So now we're at the Dominate phase, which is going to show you, as it says here, how to climb to the top and how to stay there without wasting your time or your money, and also without having to watch your back. So if you haven't seen the first two webinars in this series, that's okay. I certainly encourage you to stay and listen to what we have to say today, but I do also recommend that you go back and watch those first two webinars. As I'm about to explain here, trying to implement these tactics out of order is unlikely to produce the kind of results that you want. It's really about knowing what to do, how to do it, and in what order these things need to be done. So, a question that you may have thought about, or maybe you haven't thought about it yet, is this: when should I enter this phase? When am I ready to dominate my market? And the answer to that question is really based on several things. First, it's a matter of understanding the fundamentals and applying them. And that's why you'll hear me and Rachel keep stressing that if you haven't seen those first two webinars in this series, go back and watch them. Because it's not just a knowledge is power aspect here. It's really the knowledge and action that matters. Knowing what's going to move the needle is one thing. Actually applying those fundamentals to your law firm's web presence and doing those things consistently over time is another. So make sure that you have that solid content foundation for your law firm's website and blog, and that you have a plan and a strategy as you're moving forward. The next thing to consider when you're wondering when you're going to be ready to enter this particular phase of your law firm's growth is looking at some data that's related to your law firm's web presence. How many visits is your site getting? And this really isn't a cut and dry number for every business attorney or every law firm out there. Your geography is going to play a part in this as well. So, for example, if you are part of a smaller market, you might be ready to start thinking about dominating your market if you're getting 200 visits a day. However, if you are in a much larger market and a much more competitive market, something like Los Angeles, then this number might shoot up to 1,000 visits a day before you're ready to start thinking about this phase. So knowing your total addressable market is important as well. And if you were with us for the second part of this webinar series, you probably heard Dan and I discuss this concept when we were talking about the growth risks in terms of attorneys who sometimes are focused on what is ultimately an unsupportable market. They're trying to squeeze more business out of it than the market supports. But the bottom line there was that it's essential to know what your total addressable market is and then optimize your marketing for that reality. So we have attorney members here at LawLytics who are now in the dominate phase after following our advice from the start and the grow webinars, who have avoided the traps and the tricks that so often get attorneys into trouble. And their websites are now receiving tens of thousands of visits a month and often thousands of visits in a day. So whether you are a LawLytics member right now or you're thinking about becoming one and you want a roadmap for how to get there, reach out to us and we'll put together a comprehensive plan for your firm that can help you achieve those goals. At LawLytics, there are a couple of things that we firmly believe. The first is that having a law firm website that you own and that you control, when you pair that with an investment in a solid content strategy, that can become an appreciating asset for you and for your firm. And we also see that there are really two things that you can invest into your online marketing, and in particular into your law firm website and blog. One is money, the other one is time. And as it often goes in life, there's a chance that you'll have more of one than the other, just depending upon where you are in the growth phase of your firm. But let's first consider the case of a young attorney who is just starting out. This attorney might not have a lot of money to play around with, and they might not have a lot of clients yet, but what they do have available to them is time. And therefore, writing their own content can be a smart investment of the time that they have available to them. And as we've said previously, the internet is really the great equalizer. Marketing has become a meritocracy, so you no longer have to have the biggest budget in the game if you want to compete. So if this young attorney happens to have more time available than money, if they have a solid content plan and they have a clear roadmap, then they can use their time wisely to produce their own substantive content and blog posts, and that'll put their firm on the board and help them get noticed by potential clients. Now, as they move along and as their business starts to grow, they're going to have more clients and they're going to be making more money. And at this point, they may still want to continue writing their own content, but they might also choose to delegate a little bit of their content as well, even if they continue adding to their website themselves. Here's the problem. As you grow, particularly as you are taking on more and more clients, writing your own content has an opportunity cost. As you're growing and as you're growing, you are suddenly going to have some serious demands placed on your time. And it's why we mentioned in the last webinar that it's really worth thinking about things like intake systems and so on before you get to this point, because you don't want to let yourself get overwhelmed. But one of the things that you're going to have to think about as these demands are placed on your time is the opportunity cost of writing your own content. It's the choice that has to be made between what is often mutually exclusive, money or time. To illustrate this point, let's look at how our content creation department here at LawLytics actually evolved. When LawLytics first started, our early adopters were very excited about writing content. for the first time, they had access to a system that would not only allow them to easily publish optimized content to their own websites and blogs, but they had our system to make sure that they were doing it well. Attorneys who use LawLytics to write their own content and who follow our recipe over time are successful and achieve market-leading results. And as a byproduct of this success, they become busier in their practices. But what this presents is a catch-22 for attorneys who also would like to do things like sleep or have a work-life balance. They know that the content that they're writing using LawLytics is fueling their success, but then their success is preventing them from continuing to write or demanding other sacrifices. In order to keep up with the reward cycle of writing content, many of our early adopters at LawLytics realized that in order to sustain that edge that they were getting through content writing, they were going to have to delegate that task to somebody else. And our content creation department evolved out of that need. So the more clients you've got, the less time that you have to keep writing content. And the problem is that you can't just stop writing content. Having new content added to your site is an important factor that Google takes into consideration for rankings and relevancy. And the freshness of your content is something that Rachel is going to discuss in depth shortly. But to keep the flywheel moving, you have to have new content. And if new demands are being placed on your time and you can't write it because you want to be focused on the practice of law, then your rankings can suffer, which would then likely harm your revenue, and the whole thing can fall apart. So it's a complicated dance because, of course, you want to keep up that momentum that you've worked so hard for. So this is where that other investment comes into play: money. If you are in the dominate phase, you have a marketing budget to work with that's likely larger than what a beginning attorney would have. So you may not have the time to write anymore yourself, but you do have the money. And here's where it may be time to delegate your content creation efforts to somebody else. Now, before I get into how to do this wisely, there's a couple points I want to make specifically on the ethics of ghostwriting. So there's a camp of purists on the web who will argue that attorneys should always and under all circumstances write their own content for their law firm websites and blogs. And in an ideal world, we agree with that. But in the real world, where balancing a practice with the business side of law while trying to maintain a quality of life, you can see where I'm going with this. But those who argue against proxy writing of online content will point out that if the attorney doesn't write their own website content, then it lacks authenticity, or that the content misleads readers into believing that the content came directly from the attorney. Some will argue that it's unethical. Some assert that all lawyers are natural writers, or that they love writing, and that they should not only provide the content for their websites, but that they should also enjoy doing so. Each of these arguments really contains some logical and practical fallacies. And we've gone into greater detail about the ethics of ghostwriting in a webinar that is available on demand over at the LawLytics website. And that specifically addresses this topic. But overall, my point is this: if you are comfortable delegating the creation of a brief, proofreading it, and then signing your name onto it and submitting it to the court, then the analogy is exactly the same when a ghostwriter is writing content for you. So if you're going to use a ghostwriter successfully, it comes down to a couple of things. The first is that you need to be able to delegate wisely. You also need to be able to empower people who not only understand, but also will abide by the necessary ethics. And you also need to keep a level of editorial control that makes you feel comfortable saying that as the attorney who's responsible for the content on your website, you know what's been published. So by choosing a professional writer that you can hold accountable, you maintain a consistent publishing schedule that ensures that your website and blog aren't going to be neglected. Because we have seen plenty of law firm websites that have these large bursts of content creation, especially on the blog. You know, maybe it'll be 10 posts in a month, and then the blog goes dormant for months or years. And content marketing is not optimally effective when you simply put some content on your blog and then quit. It really works best with the consistent publication of posts that answer your clients' questions in detail. So it's easy to get enthusiastic about blogging for short periods of time, but it's harder to sustain that enthusiasm over the long term. And persistence with blogging and other forms of content creation on your law firm's website, like substantive pages, the persistence with that on a regular basis is what is going to get you ahead. So if you pause your blogging efforts, your competition who isn't pausing, and that could be a well-funded firm who's delegating their content to writers, or like the example from before, an attorney who's, say, fresh out of law school with all the time in the world to blog, those people will get ahead of you if you're not adding content to your law firm's website and blog regularly. So just a couple last things before I hand this over to Rachel. I do want to briefly point out something. So if you are a LawLytics member or you've been with us for a few webinars, then you know how easy it is to use our system to add to and edit your website. And what we also make it easy to do is allowing you to delegate those tasks to others, such as in the case where you've got a partner or an associate who's going to blog. But on top of that, we also make it easy for you to have control in the case where you do hire a professional proxy writer. So the LawLytics user access controls that are featured in our control panel really make delegating this work to others a total breeze. And that's without relinquishing the kind of control that you as the attorney need over your web presence. So as you can see here, you can add an unlimited number of users, and then for each user, you can indicate who that person is ghostwriting for. As you can see in this particular example, we have a summer associate who's going to ghostwrite for Dan here. And as you can see as well, there's that little blue checkbox that says requires approval before publishing. And that makes sure that you have control over what goes on your website. And that's even if you have somebody else ghostwriting for you. And there are additional permissions that you can select as well to ensure that the person who is ghostwriting for you has as little or as much access to other things like your sites if you have multiple websites, or your blog posts, or your case results, or social media, and so on and so forth. If you are curious to learn a little bit more about the effective use of ghostwriters and what I was talking about earlier, I do really recommend checking out the webinar that we did on that subject a little while ago. And the web address to access it is at the bottom of your screen there. One last point that I want to make to you is this. Your time is valuable, and especially so if you're in the domination phase of your law firm's growth. The quality content that you add to your law firm's website on a regular basis is really the key to starting and growing a successful web presence and ultimately to dominate your market. But if you can't write for your website on a regular basis, then really it comes down to using a professional proxy writer. That's the next best choice that you can make. And as I said earlier, the LawLytics content department evolved out of that very specific need. So attorneys who had been writing their own content and as a result of that got so successful that they needed help to keep publishing. And today we're writing millions of words of content for attorney websites and blogs. And Rachel Shalat, who's going to speak to you in just a moment, is the Vice President of Content Operations, and she oversees that entire effort. But before I turn it over to her, I do want to talk briefly about our content creation services for those who are interested. We have an in-house content creation department that's managed by lawyers. Many of our writers are lawyers. All of them have strong writing and legal backgrounds. And all of the content that gets published on behalf of our customers who choose us to write for them goes through an editorial process where lawyers look at it before it ever gets published. We have several levels of content creation that we provide, and these are services ranging from startup content where there is a brand new website that doesn't have any content to get it off the ground, to creating attorney bios, creating practice areas, and so forth. And that goes all the way up to these really extensive build-outs of over 1 million words for attorneys who want to, over the course of a year or more, build a dominating website for a certain practice area or practices or for certain geographic areas. But between those two extremes, we also have a la carte content. So say you're writing your own content and you have something big coming up that's occupying your time and you don't want to have a lag in your content. We can jump in, we can pick up where you left off and sustain it until you can jump back in and start working again. And we also have the ability to do ongoing recurring monthly blogging and content creation for our clients as well. What I want to say here is that at LawLytics, we really pride ourselves on having more than just a vendor-customer relationship with you. We take a lot of time at the outset to get to know you and to create a partnership that allows you to participate as little or as much as you want in the creation of your law firm website content. We want to know how you like your content written as far as voice goes. We want to get to know your objectives, to know your practice area. So we'll look at what you're trying to accomplish as well as what you've already accomplished, and then we'll make a plan with you to get there. So with that said, I'm now going to turn it over to Rachel Shalott, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about building on your content. Rachel?
Thank you so much, Victoria. As you heard earlier, prior to joining LawLytics, I practiced criminal defense in Pennsylvania, and I now oversee the LawLytics content department. We work with our attorney clients to plan, create, and refine their web content. So when we're working with a firm who has a really dominating site, we generally see content that is structured in the following ways. First off, there's going to be a substantial base of evergreen or substantive pages, and these include your practice area pages, your reputational pages, your local pages. If you were with us in our Grow session, I discussed achieving a target size for your market area. Over the past few years, we've been conducting market research to see what makes attorney sites that are utilizing organic content marketing successful in a variety of different metro areas across the United States. And we also look at a variety of different practice areas. And the one constant we see is that dominating firms have the highest page volume in their market area. Of course, this volume, this size, it's going to depend on exactly where your firm is located. The build that will be necessary for a firm seeking to dominate a small rural county is going to be very different than one attempting to, say, be competitive in Los Angeles. But the best thing about organic content marketing is that this base is going to be your single most valuable asset. You're going to get an incredibly high ROI. The bulk of the time and resources will go into your initial content build, and this can be quite a substantial undertaking. When we've executed these builds, they typically span anywhere from 18 months up to 3 years. But the reason why we've seen with our firms who are really, really killing it in these market areas is this investment is absolutely worth it, because the value from this content build will only grow and grow over time. After you've achieved a substantial size, you can kind of shift away from a creation or addition phase to what we think of as enhancement or a maintenance phase. And what I mean by enhancing your website is that you're going to be able to add collateral to the site that will increase the appeal of your site to potential clients. We're going to discuss potential enhancements to your site, including infographics and white papers, in just a few moments. These firms also employ a blogging strategy to keep their site fresh and up to date. And finally, they utilize a sophisticated sharing strategy to get their content to the widest possible audience and to establish solid personal connections with that audience. So right now, I'd like to take a little bit of time and focus on blogging. Blogging can serve a variety of purposes. Blog content can be shared via social media, increasing the range of your potential audience. Blog content also has the potential to be interactive. That is, potential clients and others in the field can read a blog post and comment, opening up new channels of communication with your firm. And blogging is also a great way to relay rapidly changing information. For example, at the end of the last calendar year following the results of the election, there were a lot of articles coming out and there was a lot of speculation on, changing estate tax, what will change next year, a lot of things like that. So when there's a big rush of information like that, it's relevant to your practice area, but it's not something such as, an announced change to federal law. It's speculation. It's not something you want to create a substantive page on, but it's something that you want to speak about, and it's something that you should absolutely be speaking about because everyone else is reading about it and thinking about it. It gives you a great channel for that. However, There will be times when this type of information isn't coming out at a rush, and we sometimes see firms who neglect blogging because they think if there isn't any information that's currently coming out that they need to speak about now, and their blog content isn't having a certain level of activity on social media, or if their posts aren't receiving a certain amount of comments, that blog content isn't really doing anything for them. And this line of thinking is problematic, especially for firms who have these large site sizes, because it neglects another important role that blog content can play for a site, and that is to keep the site fresh. Reaching a desired build in your evergreen pages is important because you're establishing your site as an authority in a particular area. The size of your site is going to be instrumental, as we've proven, in getting strong search engine rankings. But as we see here in this excerpt from Google's Search Engine Optimization Starter Guide, it's important that your content is not only unique, but also that it is fresh. Now, this doesn't mean you need to make regular drastic changes to your site, and the law doesn't change that frequently to even allow for this. However, we have seen that even when a site dominates a major market area, if nothing is added to the site for a particular period of time, it can start to slip in the rankings, and the search engines will start to favor newer sites, even those that might be a little bit smaller. And this is where blogging comes in. Blogging will help keep your site appear fresh to the search engines and will help you maintain your strong ranking. We found that adding a few blog posts per week can really help to prevent any type of decline in the rankings. Additionally, blogging can serve as a base for forming connections with your target audience, and that can include current, former, and/or potential clients. Your blog content will be a rich source of shareable material that you can use across all of your social media platforms. And many firms who are in this space take social media a step forward, and they use direct email newsletters. And these can be sent to a list generated from current and former clients and/or users who took a subscription action on your site. Newsletters allow your firm to showcase the blog content that you think would be especially relevant or interesting. And again, it helps you form this deeper personal connection with your audience. Now I'd like to transition to discussing substantive pages when you're in this dominating phase. And there are two things I'd like to address. The first is enhancing your site volume. When you've reached this phase, your site contains a multitude of pages that directly relate to your practice area and the services that your firm offers. In our earlier webinar series, you may have heard me caution against attorneys using any of their valuable time or resources to cover topics that don't directly relate to exactly what your firm does. But once we've reached, or we're striving to reach, this really dominating position, I do change my tune on this. Now is the time to start adding these pages that are basically educational in nature, and that they don't directly relate to a service that you will provide a potential client, but they educate people who you think might be in your base of potential clients, or those who are connected to a base of potential clients. If you're starting out or you're just starting to grow your site, you don't want to waste any resources on covering a topic from which you're not going to obtain clients or directly obtain revenue. So these topics are not going to be included in an initial content plan. However, once you've comprehensively covered the types of cases you do take, you have the ability, and you absolutely should, start to branch out and cover related topics. The breadth of ancillary topics that you should cover, again, it's going to be consistent with your market. It will depend on where you're located, and it will depend on what your competitors are doing, depend on how large the sites are that you are competing against. Location, your market, always going to dictate your content creation requirements and efforts and what you'll need to be successful. Next, I want to talk about updating your substantive pages. The reason why we call these pages evergreen pages is that the content on them is unlikely to change. However, changes in state or federal legislation or case law can sometimes make it necessary to do updates throughout your site. When you have a very large site, it can be incredibly difficult to locate every instance where you reference a particular statute that might have changed. So one thing we recommend that firms do, especially when they have these really large sites, is to create some type of index, and something like a spreadsheet can be a really easy way to do this. where you note every place in your site in terms of particular pages where you might have particular statutory information. So that way, if there is an announced change or a case is decided that changes something, you can easily locate these pages and come up with a plan for updating them. And now I'd like to touch on the site enhancements that I mentioned earlier. There are many different types of collateral you can add to your site, which really enhances the experience that a user has. But I'm going to take some time and talk about two particular types: white papers and infographics. White papers are generally about 3 to 7 page documents, and they cover a particular topic in great detail. So for example, you might create a white paper that gives a really comprehensive overview of how you need to file your taxes, your state and federal taxes if you're an independent contractor. And these documents serve a multitude of purposes. They can be an educational resource for a visitor to your site who wants a really nuanced understanding of a particular topic. But we've also worked with firms that use white papers kind of in a more traditional sense, and that is as a print resource. So some firms will mail out relevant packets of white papers to clients who've come in for an initial consultation. Others take white papers and leave them for distribution in an area where they might have potential clients, such as like entrepreneur meetup, these types of things. As far as density of information goes, infographics are kind of on the far end of the spectrum from white papers. That is, they illustrate concepts in a graphical form, with the focus much more on the visual depiction rather than the text. So for example, you might create an infographic demonstrating what a 409A valuation is and how startups should go about obtaining these. Infographics can greatly enhance the experience a visitor has on your site because they capitalize upon the strong preference many users have for visual information. And additionally, infographics are highly shareable and they seem to be incredibly popular on social media. There are tools out there for creating free infographics, but I do want to mention a word of caution here. The most effective infographics and white papers follow the branding guidelines of their firm, and they're paired with things such as complementary colors. Complementary in terms of palette, but also colors that are utilized appropriately to evoke a specific desired response from your audience. If you're with us during the Grow series of our webinars, Sophia, one of our senior designers, discussed the psychological element of colors. Different colors have been found to evoke different emotional responses. And this is something that absolutely should be taken into account when creating these types of collateral for your site. So for those firms who are on the LawLytics platform, the same team of graphic and web designers who imported and configured or who created your logo will be responsible for the creation of things such as white papers and infographics, so we can assure that the logo and colors remain consistent across all platforms, and also that all visual elements are embedded seamlessly into your website, and they're appropriately configured for desktop and mobile users. So when you're just starting out, or when you're growing your site, your focus is going to be on content creation because the ultimate goal is getting more visitors to your site. But once you've reached a position where you're really dominating your area, you are getting these high visitor numbers, but you're competing with other firms who are also doing very well and getting high numbers. So what you need to do now is give your users a memorable, positive, and unique experience on your site. When you reach the phase where you are dominating your region, chances are you'll be experiencing some changes along the way. These might be minor, such as adding junior associates, or they might be major, such as losing a partner, bringing on a new partner, changing the name of your firm. So when you're faced with a major change, it's critical to keep in mind your web presence and develop a plan of action as early as you're able to, just as you might plan and execute other necessary steps for a change, such as leasing your office space. If your firm will be experiencing a change in name, will you keep your logo the same? Oftentimes, logo changes become necessary because partner initials are a common element of law firm logos. If you must change your logo, will you change other graphic elements within your branding guidelines? Will your colors change or will they stay the same? If you're expanding to a new office location, does this warrant additional web content or merely an addition to your office location page? Do you need to review your existing calls to action that appear on the bottom of each page of your site to make sure that new geographic information has been properly communicated to potential clients? And if you're faced with a very sudden change, such as a partner or associate leaving and starting a rival firm, how will you handle this as far as your website is concerned? One of the chief reasons we design LawLytics to give the attorney such a high degree of control is to empower you to be able to quickly make changes to things such as your attorney's staff, should you be faced with a major change. You can also easily unpublish one page or page groups if you need to make unanticipated changes. It's a good idea just to keep these things on your radar and sketch out a tentative plan of action for how you'd handle potential changes should they arise in the future. And finally, a change, and a really positive one that we commonly see with firms who are in this phase, is expansion. Firms who are dominating a particular market area now have the ability to expand in new geographic regions. Sometimes this is a new metro area, sometimes an additional state or a tri-state area. This might even be a nationwide expansion. So when you're preparing for an expansion, there are some concerns related to your web presence you need to address. And a common concern can be how to add content for a new region. So we've seen firms integrate new geographic areas into existing sites very successfully, but we've also seen the launch of multiple sites be an effective tactic as well, and there are a variety of concerns to weigh when you're deciding how to proceed. If you're taking on a new practice area, or there's something in particular that you want to highlight in the new region, the new area where you're expanding, launching a second or third site might be the best route to take because you can really focus on one element or a set of elements that you think would bring you success in this new region. So you don't have to dilute what you already have. You can make, the second site focus particularly on a practice area or maybe one particular type of business that you want to bring in. If you're expanding to an area that has a lot of tech startups and you really, really want to focus on consultation with people who are in this field, you can launch additional sites and have those be very specific. However, there are some ethical concerns that come up. For example, some states require particular disclaimer language to be located on each web page, and others require that content might be submitted to the state's bar review prior to publication. So in these circumstances, separate sites also might be the way to go to help ensure compliance with the state bar. However, if you don't have any of these particular elements that you want to highlight and you don't have these ethical concerns, adding new regions to an existing site has a lot of benefits because the new content will really reap a lot of rewards from the strong position of the existing content within the search engines. And the new content can boost the existing content, and that your site will be larger, it will continue to appear more authoritative on a particular topic. And finally, many dominant firms engage in what I'll call informational expansion. Like I mentioned before, adding things that are only educational in nature. So this is when firms aren't expanding to new jurisdictions, but they have information that does expand to new areas. So even if they don't plan on doing an expansion, this opens up new avenues to make the site visit experience much more rich. So you can incorporate things such as infographics, clickable maps, and again, you're also establishing your firm as the ultimate authority on a particular subject. So to wrap up, if you have any more specific questions regarding content for your site, I really encourage you to reach out to us. You can shoot us an email at writing@lawlytics.com, and some of you might already be familiar with her, but Alyssa Rhodes is the director of our content services. And over the past couple of years, she's helped many attorneys plan and create their content. So if you have a brief question, you want some additional resources, or assistance planning for the long term, we're more than happy to help. And I'm now going to turn the mic back over to Victoria, who's going to cover a few more important elements before we wrap up for the day.
Thanks, Rachel. So a few last things that I want to mention before we complete this webinar, and one of them is the risks that you face at this stage of your growth. And some of these are going to be familiar to you if you've been with us for the first 2 parts of this webinar series, but some of the risks that you'll face at this stage may be new. The first is bad practices, and this is one that's a risk to you at any point throughout your law firm's growth, but in this stage it can be particularly dangerous because of all the work that you've put in already and all of the progress that you've made. And bad practices here can include things that you do yourself or things that you may not know are being done on your behalf. Bad links are one of those things that can cause trouble. Other things like duplicate pages and duplicate content. But if you need a refresher on all of the bad practices that can get you into trouble with Google, I definitely recommend that you go check out Google's Webmaster Guidelines just to make sure that you stay on the right side of things. And of course, if you have somebody else handling some aspect of your web presence, this is a good thing to know so that you know what's being done and why, and whether that's in line with what Google expects. The next one on this list is related to bad practices to some degree, because if you've been engaging in bad practices, particularly ones that go against Google's Webmaster Guidelines, then you can be in trouble the next time that Google does make an algorithm change. Keep in mind, at scale, bad practices are amplified. So the more visible you are, plus whatever bad practices you engage in, that can mean the more likely it is for somebody to report your practices rather to the authorities. And the more likely it is that all of the work that you've done up to this point can come tumbling down. And when you have a solid content strategy, one that focuses on providing value and useful information to your potential clients, and when you understand the rules of Google, then you're not going to have to sweat the next time Google makes an algorithm change. You'll know that what you are doing is on the right track. The target on your back. So I recognize that sounds kind of ominous, but the higher that you climb and the more success that you have, the more you may find others trying to copy what you're doing. And sometimes that includes downright copying your content. The content that you create may not only attract potential clients, it might attract your competitors as well. And that can be really frustrating after all of the work that you've put in to create work that's original and useful for your potential clients, to have someone come along and copy it for their own website. If you find that somebody is stealing your content, there are some things that you can do. First, there are definitely tools for detection. Google Alerts is a good one. Copyscape is another good choice. But if you happen to find your work somewhere else on the web, there are a couple tactics that you can employ. And the first thing that you may want to try is just picking up the phone and calling the attorney who's copying your content. We've talked a lot about in this webinar series about things that are done for attorneys by legal marketers and webmasters and copywriters that the attorneys who hire them may not even know about. And this could be a case like that. It is possible that this attorney hired somebody else and that person lifted your content for the attorney's site. So calling the attorney directly can sometimes resolve this issue. And it doesn't hurt either to follow up your phone call with an email as well. That'll provide you with a record of your request and what was said. But if that doesn't work, either you can't reach the person by phone, they're not responding to their email, or you do get in touch with them and they just refuse to remove the content, then there's always the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or the DMCA. And a DMCA takedown is when content is removed from a website at the request of the owner of the content or the owner of the copyright of the content. But at the end of the day, keep in mind, your time is valuable. You only have so much of it. And if you spend too much time running around after people who are copying your work, that'll take away from your ability to produce even more content for your site. And perhaps more importantly, it'll keep you from being focused on your practice. So really, it's a balance. The last thing on this list is sabotage. And sabotage can show up in a variety of different forms. Of the many reasons we caution against using pay-per-click marketing to carry your law firm's business, there's click fraud to think about. So if a competitor knows that you are using PPC, they might just click on your ads because they can. And that, of course, costs you money without anything to show for it. As we've said in previous webinars, PPC comes with some risks in that the people who are clicking on your ads, They might be accidental clicks, they might actually be potential clients, but they also might be your competitors. And whether or not that person is an actual potential client who might actually convert and is actually interested in contacting your law firm, once that money is gone, it's gone. Now, another form of sabotage that could come up, though I will say that this would take an extraordinary amount of time and effort on the part of whoever was responsible, is submitting your site to link farms and directories that have been sources of spam. I will say this though, once you are really well established, as you would be at the domination phase of your growth, and you have these huge content build-outs with millions of words and tons of useful information for your potential clients, and you're generating a lot of revenue from that work, if someone were to do that, it would be established pretty quickly that you were likely not responsible for such a thing. It just would not make sense that you would do something like that after all of the work that you've put in. However, a more likely method of sabotage would be something like this. It would be a competitor who hires someone or hires a company to try and smear your reputation. And that is why we really stress, as we did in the last webinar, to get on top of your reputation management early. Ask for those reviews often. Start building those resources early on. And here at LawLytics, we offer a Bird Eye Reputation Management add-on for our attorney members, but we also offer it to our non-members. It's just not as deeply discounted as it is with our membership. So if you're curious about that, we recently did a webinar on the general subject of reputation management that also covers our Bird Eye add-on, and that's now available to view on demand over at our website. One last thing I want to bring up is what could be described as the 1% difference makers. But before I discuss what they are, I want to mention why it's important to implement these difference makers now and not at some earlier point in your foundational and growth strategies. This is one of those things that can trip up attorneys. This is an area where attorneys will want to obsess over implementing these bits right out of the gate, but if you do that, they're not going to have the effect that they will if you do them once your foundation has been established. So let's quickly talk about what those are. The first one is semantic markup. So if you're not familiar with this term, semantic markup refers to the code that's used to reinforce the meaning of your web pages to search engines, which can help them be found when a potential client makes a relevant search. Humans, of course, have eyes. We can look at something and make a determination about what a web page means or what it's about. Search engines can't do that. And what this markup does is it helps the search engine understand what a page is about and whether that page is relevant to somebody's interests when they make a relevant query. And with LawLytics, our system automatically adds attorney-specific markup. It is strategic and it's effective, and it helps your work get found by potential clients. And I think best of all, it doesn't require you to quit your day job to learn how to code or anything like that. Page speed is the next thing on this list. And again, this is one of those issues that attorneys just sometimes obsess about. We brought it up in the Grow webinar for this business law series, but I bring it up again because I think it's valuable to understand what role this plays in your law firm's web presence. I'm going to reiterate just briefly what was discussed in the last webinar, and that's this. For example, let's say you have a completely blank website, so plain white page. That's a site that is likely to score a perfect score or close to a perfect score on a site speed calculator. Now, as you keep adding elements to a site, you're going to see a decrease in that site speed. And if you add a lot of heavy elements, if you're adding a lot of unnecessary bells and whistles, then you're really going to see that number drop. So what we explained in that webinar, if you didn't join us for it, it's about striking the balance between a completely empty website, which of course would not do you any good, and a site that's overloaded with elements that slow it down. Now, once you are at the domination phase of your growth, there's something else to consider here. Where site speed is concerned, so long as your site is reasonably fast, so we're talking 70th percentile 80 in mobile, it doesn't make too much of a difference. But if you're suddenly getting 15,000 visits a day, some of those visits are going to come from mobile on a 3G connection, and that could mean a slow loading site. And as we know, if a site loads too slowly, a potential client's first line of defense is to leave and go find another site that loads faster and answers their questions. So getting big numbers means that there is something additional that you have to balance, not just the elements of the site, but the number of visitors that you're receiving. Marketing automation. When you have just a few visitors at first, your goal should be to get the visitors to your site. But as your site grows and your visits grow, then you're going to want to build up your options. It's not going to be enough anymore to have your options be contact my firm or leave. And really, that's not even enough in the early phases. You want to give your potential clients lots of text information about their case or matter or problem. But when you start hitting those big numbers, then it's time to think about a variety of ways to present that information. So like what Rachel was talking about, ebooks, white papers, other collateral, newsletter subscriptions. And while you have to create those yourself or hire somebody to do it for you, sending these items to potential clients are things that can be handled efficiently by marketing automation software. And I've written a lot of blogs on a number of popular marketing automation software tools for attorneys that you can find over at our blog. But that way, once you have done the work or you've hired somebody to do the work for you of creating that collateral, then you can use marketing automation software to send it for you and create that connection between you and your potential client. And that includes even when it's outside of office hours and you're already home. Marketing automation can help you do more work and reach more clients around the clock. Last on this list are some things to experiment with. And the first one is CTAs. So when you're at the biggest phase of your growth, then you can start experimenting with the calls to action that you feature on your law firm's website. So try different action words, try different phrasing, see what draws in more clients. Form fields are another good thing to experiment with. So your potential clients are busy, just as you are. They don't want to have to do any more work than what is necessary to reach you. So where you can, see if you can edit down your form fields to whatever is absolutely necessary. And there was a good example of this recently in the news with the company Expedia. On the one hand, this is a story about how to root out hidden profits with analytics, but Expedia discovered a really interesting problem. They were noticing that they had a lot of customers who were clicking their Buy Now button, but then these customers never went on to complete their transaction. So what was happening? Here we have people who, as far as leading indicators of purchase intent go, they said, appeared to be ready to finish that transaction, but they didn't. So when Expedia conducted this research and looked into what was happening, what they found was something that was actually oddly simple. Expedia had this optional field under name, which was company. And what happened was this. It was confusing customers who filled out that company field with their bank name. So after they'd put in their bank name, these customers went on to enter the address of their bank rather than their home address. So then when it came time to verify their credit card, it would fail because it wasn't the address of the card holder. When Expedia fixed this problem, they actually increased their profits by $12 million. And this, of course, is an extreme example, but my point here is to minimize any sort of user error or frustration that might happen with your form fields. Don't make your potential clients work any harder than they have to. And Expedia later said that they'd found a number of other issues that were like this one by doing a couple things. They were using their data to their advantage, and they were also really paying attention to their customers. Another thing to think about is this. Think about setting expectations on your form. So if you say that you will return calls within 5 minutes, and as a starting solo practitioner, that works, but as things grow and as your business grows, that's just not true anymore. It's the difference between not being able to meet that expectation and changing what it says on that form, or having a better intake system where you have maybe 2 or 3 people available to answer the telephone. The last thing on this list is call tracking. And at LawLytics, we can help you integrate things like CallRail. And that can help you measure your calls, see where they're coming from, so you can see what's driving them, and then use that information to fine-tune your marketing even more. So this is the last webinar in our Start, Grow, Dominate series for business attorneys. And again, if you missed the first two webinars, feel free to go check them out over at the LawLytics website, or for that matter, any of our other free on-demand webinars, as well as blog posts. All of those resources are available to you for free to help you better understand how the internet works and how your potential clients are using it to find you. If you have questions about your legal marketing or you're ready to take your online marketing to the next level, we are here to help and we're happy to talk with you. So feel free to contact us through any of the methods that you see here. You can submit a consultation request from our main website at www.lawlytics.com. You can always call us at 800-713-0161 or shoot us an email at info@lawlytics.com. With that, I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and I want to thank Rachel for her presentation. At this time, I'm going to end the recording and check to see if there are any questions.